I would like to invite everyone to be seated, and also to invite the panelists to come on the podium. And this segment will be from, I guess now from 4:78 to for about an hour to 5:08. So Kate Gordon, who was one of the presenters in the previous panel, will moderate this discussion. And we look forward, and she will also leave opportunities for the audience to ask questions. Okay, Kate, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. I think we have, we will have microphones in the audience for when people want to ask questions. I will start by asking a couple of questions to the panel because I thought there was a couple of things that came up that were potentially really interesting. And Prakash, are you joining this panel? You're joining this panel. So you want to sit here and I'll stand? I can stand. Yeah, I thought you were joining the panel. Yeah. Here, I'll just sit here and I'll just stand. I'll just stand. That's fine. I have multiple microphones. Good, I'm so glad you're joining this panel. All right. I can just stand too because I'm human. All right, I'll sit here. I'm still looking at you all. So I'll start with a couple of questions, and then I fear that you did not have a chance to ask questions earlier today, so I would really like to open it up because this room has in it a number of people who are thinking about technology, thinking about policy in China, and you are just as much expert as we are, so we would love to hear you. But let me start by asking a question, and this will give Leo you a chance to talk about the circle a little more if you want to. But really for everyone, this conference is focused on U.S.-China collaboration, and we've all talked a little bit about what's possible. But I would love to hear from maybe Julio first, but others as well, including Prakash on the water side. What have you seen work? Sort of when it comes to collaboration between the U.S. and China advancing issues of mutual importance, what are the best practices and what have you seen not work? So what would you hold out there as really something to model, and what would you say? We tried this for a variety of reasons, it didn't work out.
Well, if I can start, why don't I mention a couple of things from the circuit and also some things that sort of came out of the circuit. One of the things that worked about the circuit is that it was ministerial level drivers and buy-ins. And that was matched by an equal commitment on both sides. It was always U.S. and China are a harmonious partnership of equals, in which the financial commitment and the resource goals are agreed to and matched. And that having that paired at the ministerial level meant that there was a way to get the money, that when we ran into problems, there was somebody to go to. It was sort of very, very helpful in those regards.
That's a great.
A specific second point around that was the way that helped in IP discussions. A lot of people sort of think about IP issues as sort of a major impediment. We found that once we had some quick agreement and everybody sort of understood what was going on, it was manageable. It was a small and real thing we had to manage, but it was doable. And part of the reason why, again, is because you had this high level buy-in. That ties back to the third thing. One of the things that has worked, I think, well are joint ventures. Because again, they carry that same sensibility. It's a partnership of equals. Everybody has skin in the game. The Chinese partners protect the U.S. IP. The U.S. partner protects the Chinese IP. There's sort of a way to make it work, and that structure has been one which seems to have worked quite well. The other thing that I think has worked in all of these discussions is to go in with a certain amount of humility and respect. I think when you walk into the room and sort of start pointing fingers and declaring that you're the biggest and the best, whatever, it's doomed to failure. You really, I think, need to understand how daunting the effort is broadly on both sides of the Pacific, and then that needs to be good.
No, that's a great answer, and it's essentially what you're saying is it's a business relationship to some extent. I mean, you're coming to the table as business partners trying to get to a place of mutual agreement and understanding, less as coming to the table, sometimes we do as countries, with a sort of a status right, in place, or is it, you know, one person is the big dog? It's really a collaborative effort. What have others seen kind of work in this space, or not work? I think we can all learn from mistakes too. So, anyone else want to weigh in?
Yeah, so, you know, there's been tons of MOUs signed and very high level buy-in, and some of those have fizzled out and not done anything. The ones that I've seen that actually have worked have, you know, resources behind them. You know, people are willing to commit staff time, they're willing to commit like actual funding, and it's, you know, over a long term, multiple years. I think, you know, true U.S.-China cooperation is very, very difficult to do. You know, it's easy to kind of say we'll do it and then forget about it, and the next hot topic comes up and years and move on. The other thing I think has a fair amount of potential is subnational cooperation. I think California has been fairly good at this. Going around this, a couple MOUs with provincial governors in China, and they're still working and they're ongoing, and there seems to be a lot of success there, in particular with air pollution.
Well, you've seen that, Josh, obviously, with looking at subnational agreements like RGGI in California on the ETS side, and how do you collaborate with these subnational provinces that are doing ETS now in China, and then how do you actually build that up? I mean, how do you turn a subnational conversation into a national conversation?
When I came to China, one of the things I learned early on was that before you could be heard, you had to listen. And before you could hear what they said to you, you need to leave behind at the border, your preconceived notions. And there are, you're doomed to failure if you walk in and say, China should follow the example of the SO2 program or the RGGI program in California, because it's worked and here are the proof points. Then subnationals are interested in learning about the experiences that have gone before them because they're points of reference. Because they have problems that are immediately in front of them. And I think in terms of what works is finding a problem that is meaningful to the people you're working with, and finding a solution, possible solution, where there's not going to find a solution that's meaningful to your Chinese partners as well as to your American partners. We're an eco-partner, we're working with an eco-partner in Shenzhen to evaluate the ability to integrate the mobile sources, cars, trucks, buses, into the emissions trading program. The innovations that China has in front of them that they've pursued already should be extremely interesting to us in the U.S., in California, who are also faced with a significant proportion of the greenhouse gases that are being produced by transportation sources.
Well, that's a great reminder, I think, that it's not all about what can China learn from the U.S. This is really a conversation about what can others learn from China. China is moving ahead faster and at a larger scale on many of these issues than other places in the world, and there is a lot to learn from that experience.
In that exact context, though, just very quickly, something that continues to prove difficult, something that Josh had mentioned in his talk, which is data exchange and data sharing. I found that many issues that are being tackled in this CERC need to be worked at the vice presidential premier level in order to make progress. It's just very, very difficult. And that uncertainty creates problems to barriers to business that are hard to.
Yeah, I think overall, not just the energy part of it, but overall what you find, and this is based on all the discussions we're having, think tanks in DC and some visitors and former presidents and all that, is that there is a strong belief that the dependency of US and China economically is very important. And we won't grow unless they grow. We are not stable unless China is stable. And as you can see in the stock market, that happens a lot because what happened there. So that is a much newer phenomena that I used to see before 10 years ago. There is less suspicion and less fear because there's a lot of opening that happened in China. There's still some ways to go and all that. But that is one strong conviction that these two countries are interdependent economically. buying and
我
selling
删掉，我
from
马
each
上跟
other
你一起递话筒
has to be。
你
done.
需要我帮忙吗？还是
Overall,
你
we
可
are
以？
having the
可以
new
的，你可以是吧？
drum count.
你不是去楼下借火吗？
Overall, people
我找不到他们，然后我也联系不上他们，所以我
Start
回跟你
that
换了。
conversation. This moment, I was, just pulling out everyone's thoughts.
我左边，你
Just
右边是
one
吗
more？ question from you, then I want to open it up to the audience. And one that I know will be of particular interest to Josh, but I know this morning there was some conversation about carbon taxes. We first just heard Josh talk about ETS. Generally, everyone on this panel has talked about the importance of technology and scale and figuring out how to meet these international commitments by really scaling up kind of new technologies in both countries. To what extent is a price on carbon, which is just something that gets thrown around a lot, to what extent is a price on carbon sufficient to, or how big of a role does it play in that transition? Is it critically necessary immediately? Can we get some of that scale as we're figuring out this pricing mechanism, which, Josh, I came away from your presentation thinking this is very complicated, which we know. I mean, it's not easy to just put a price on something that underpins so much of the world economy. So how do you see the price playing in this sort of larger conversation about markets and technology, and how where's your sense, Josh, and then I'd love to hear from others about sort of how immediate that needs to be and how much it's like the first thing to happen versus just one thing.
So let's talk about the things that we know for sure about the price. It's important because if there's lacking a price, you're not going to manage the product. You're not going to manage the output. Number two, our objective is not the price. Our objective is the environmental emission reduction. The emission reduction, we know that's necessary because the scientists told us so, and the politicians have said that we will achieve this objective. A successful program, whether it's a cap and trade program or a fee and dividend program or a cap and fee program, is not successful because it produces a price of carbon. It's successful because it achieves the environmental objective. So first and foremost, and starting and ending, we have to achieve the objective. We need a cap, and the price is a means towards that end.
Actually, I would say that rather differently, because I think that these environmental goals are not met by the price whatsoever. I think they're met by the cap. We don't have a price on mercury, we don't have a price on sulfur, we don't have a price on dumping PVCs in rivers. We just don't let people do that anymore. And setting those standards gives a clear signal to businesses about what they can and cannot do. It is a completely different way to internalize that externality. And there are certainly economic consequences, there are costs associated with those caps, but it's very different than a price or a tax or these other mechanisms. They should really, I think, be derived from these environmental goals which come from the cap or the standard.
Anything you want to do?
Yeah, I think in a perfect market economy, the price on the carbon will be more effective. But in China, unfortunately, still it's not a perfect market economy, and still with a lot of administrative political intervention. So even if the national ETS was perfectly achieved in the next 2 or 3 years, there's still lots of capacity building needs to be done, especially on the local level. And you can see from the PALACE program, it took a lot of efforts for local governments trying to educate the enterprises that have been covered by the industry and to teach them, what this means. Because not every enterprise and managers understand what the price system works and how should we benefit from them. So my opinion is that China still have especially on the local level, still have kind of steep learning curve to do, and it might take a bit longer time than the national ETS system being established. So there will be a drag between the national system and you can see the real effect from price on tap on carbon.
We'll probably be having the same conversation about a price on water in the next 10 years. So it's a precursor to that. I want to open up the conversation. I'm actually going to stand up because I can't see the whole room right now. So I'm going to move this over here. And I realize I do not have my headphones. I don't have the headphones up here, so if someone asks a question in Chinese, actually, I'm going to need help with that. So maybe I'll grab one. Thank you so much. Sadly,
但是他
you
用那
all
个的
speak
吧？
English much better than I
他
speak
是用
Chinese.
不用用这个就可以。
So let me start
对，
with.
他不用这个。
We have
哦，
questions in the room? Right here, correct.
So I actually have two questions that are related to what you guys have already talked about. One is about CERC, that I wonder if Julio can give more of an explanation about how it exactly works. Because here we have entrepreneurs and business executives coming from China who want to use this opportunity to announce collaborative projects. Now, is there any way that these people can take advantage of the CERC and use what the agreement that have been reached at the ministerial levels between the two countries in the project that they would like to push? Second question is about cap and trade. I'm somewhat surprised to hear that you guys are saying that price is not what we are looking for, but rather the cap. And if that were the case, what's the point of trying to establish a kind of market system for allocating, emissions and permits? Because the idea of scaling this is so that it will become a functional market, that enterprises will freely deal with each other, so that there will be a price that will bring all of this into somewhat of equilibrium. If price is not what we are looking for, then now wouldn't it become another administratively imposed measure, which China has many policy levers to use? Why to go for cap and trade?
Two big questions. One about the CERC and one about sort of why, if price doesn't matter, why not just top-down regulations? So, good question. Julia, you want to start with the CERC question, and then we can jump in who have experienced it or used it?
Yes, sure. So right now there are actually 5 CERC plans. One for clean coal and carbon storage, one for efficient vehicles, which is where a lot of battery work is done, one for efficient buildings, one for heavy-duty vehicles and trucks, and one for energy and water, which is the last 2 are new ones that were added when the CERC was renewed. Each of those consortia is managed independently. In each consortia, there's a U.S. team, and there's one entity, a university or a lab or something, which leads that consortium. Same thing in China, there's a group of entities that are involved. There's one group that's the lead, and the Chinese government determines that. In both cases, there are also industrial partners who are teams with those researchers in the CERC. And they provide cost share, they provide data, they provide test beds, they provide demonstration projects, and that's part of what makes the CERC work well. Because each one is managed independently, the way that a company joins the CERC is determined by each group. But there is, in fact, a pathway that's formal for groups, for companies or for research institutions to join into the CERC and become part of that team. And at least in the United States, that's done by going to that leadership and saying, we would like to be part of the CERC, but tell us what we need to do. In China, it's a similar process in which there's some ministry, either Ministry of Science and Technology or MOPR or NDRC that's involved, and they have a say on how on those companies join. It is a very good platform to announce projects, to announce joint ventures. It is a way to get access to the other government in a way which is automatically at a very high level. Those companies that have joined the CERC have ultimately re-upped and feel that they have really gotten terrific value.
So if you're a company that is excited about this and leveraging opportunities and the publicity, do you join a CERC? What do you do?
Right. So I encourage you to start with the CERC website on DOE. If you type in DOE and CERC, you find it immediately. There will then be a link to all of the different platforms and consortia, and you can go to their websites. They'll tell you how to join. They'll tell you who the members are. They'll tell you who the lead is. It's all very, very easy to find and offer.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
And if nothing else succeeds, write a letter to the DOE or send an email. and say, I want to know more about the circ, it'll end up in Bob Marley's inbox, and he will figure out who the right
He's very
person is
responsive. So,
to handle.
just a quick follow-up question on this, sir. Can you talk about the longevity of the program? So, to what extent is it dependent on, congressional allocations? To what extent is it in jeopardy?
So, yeah, and I'll try to be brief here so we have more questions. We are now in our second 5-year span. So the first 5 years were considered a success. All those original planks were extended and renewed, and then there was the additional planks added. It is important to know there is no congressional line item for any of this. This is paid for out of other programmatic funds within the brief of each group. That's helpful because it means that Congress can't really kill it. On the Chinese side, this has actually proven somewhat difficult because some of the members of the CERC platform expected to get money from their ministries and never quite came. And so a lot of times the United States is in the awkward position of going to those ministries and saying, we really need you to match this effort. But ultimately, every country decides what is in its best interests for itself. While sometimes that creates friction, ultimately it's the core strength of the CERC and what makes it work.
Great, thank you. So that's a great way in. So the second question was really about sort of, and it's a good one that I was going to follow up on too, so I'm glad you asked it, about is it really true that we don't care about price? And if so, why a market? And I would just add on to that, why put a floor on the price in California? How can you think about things like spending the revenues if you don't care about the revenues? So what is the kind of interaction between we want a market-based system and the cap is the most important thing? Josh, I'm sure you want to jump in on this, but I'd love to hear. I know Pete, you guys have done some work on the markets, and Heving, you guys have done some work on the markets. So let's hear from whoever wants to start.
Let me be clear. The most important objective is to achieve the environmental reduction, the emission reductions required. Cap starts here, it's reduced over time. Starts, reduction, that's the point, that's the sign of a successful program. The price of the carbon, which you have to take into account as a facility manager, is important for you as a manager to determine whether or not you're doing the right thing on site. The Chinese understand that the market can allow for greater reductions. Why do they know that? Because they've looked at the other cap and trade programs, like the SO2 allowance program, which projected the price was going to be here and eventually ended up down here because environmental managers are great eco-entrepreneurs. When provided with an incentive, they will figure out a way to do something with far less cost than government planners. So the price is a measure, is an indicator as to how you're doing on site and whether or not you can get somebody else to do it for you cheaper. And as is the case with the RGGI program, when the price drops to a certain level, it's a sign for the policymakers that they can have greater aspirations and they can reduce the cap, right? So if the price falls to a certain point, then you can say, you know what, I think we can do better. And you should do better when the price is that small because that means that we can take more pollution out of the air and get greater benefits sooner than we thought was possible.
And then you want to agree on this, repeat.
Yeah, I totally agree with Josh, and I think he captured it very well. Like the price is not that we are not care about the price. It's just the price is not we are after. And price is like for market is like middle ground products. Like it's basically like the participants' willingness to pay. And from climate change policy perspective, we are not concerned about the willingness. We're concerned about in the end how many emissions we have cut. And the price is actually just the tip of the iceberg. And beneath that, you have the cap system, the oxygen system, and the allocation system. And those systems, the design and the effectiveness will ultimately affect the price, the willingness to pay. And that kind of willingness to pay then will motivate the participants to engage in the market. So I think what Josh means that we have to set those the beneath the sea level the system. Other than the tip of the iceberg is the majority, the body of the iceberg. Get those systems right, set a pretty strong cap, so your price will actually motivate the participants to purchase and to to reduce the emission on their own or to purchase from others. Otherwise, if the system design fails, then even you can have a meaningful price. The net price doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think that very well encapsulates it. The only thing I would add would be, if you know the true social cost of carbon, that's when you go with a tax. If you know the true amounts that you are limiting, that's when you go cap and trade. And if neither of those will get the right number, you go standards. There's always kind of a built-in price. It's just how you decide that.
Think about the cigarette program. I mean, do we judge the success of the cigarette people reducing cigarette smoke by youth by the tax that's imposed upon the cigarettes? That reflects on what my colleague had said. It's once we know what the objective is, then we're going to say this is what we need to achieve. The economics of it is a tool that can be used by the policy.
Cigarette program is actually a good argument for the necessary global nature of all this because, well, as we've seen youth smoking go down in the U.S. because the tax has gone way up in South Asia, because that's the new market for the same companies. So it's an interesting analogy to how do we think about global markets on carbon and making sure that doesn't happen on the carbon side. We could have a whole day on this, but I want to open it up to another question from the floor, and I have one right here.
I have a question, may not be related to the policy, but one of the subtitles is sustainability.
Yeah.
I was talking to Peter during the break. I want to get some expert opinion feedback on the so-called abundancy, because one of the main types new energy and EV and lithium-based economy, right? I did a soul searching, a very deep soul searching, and studied that the lithium, the available in economic fashion is not really that abundant. With the compounding growth rate about 5 to 6% on the use application, the resource of the lithium, lithium carbonate will be, exhausted by within 20 years or so. So my question to the panel would be, in addition to that, region, what do you guys see that, in terms of this, the abundancy, as well as the so-called, what do you call this, reclaim or recycle, or the waste treatment?
Circular economy.
In terms of that, in terms of sustainability.
This is a good question.
Because I'm a strong believer in resources are limited.
Yeah. So resource limitations in this new energy economy that we're all thinking about. Blue.
So as a geologist, I know that the Earth is finite and that we run out of stuff eventually. It turns out, though, that never really happens. And we learned that with the oil economy. I lived through 2 decades of we're running out of oil, and we're just not, because the price got to a point where people figured out a new way to do it, the technology responded. And the same thing, I think, will happen with all of these things, with bismuth, with lithium, with rare earth elements, with all of these things. Antimony was slated for running that globally, but people figured out how to recycle it. They start with very coarse products and separations, then they move to microbes, then they move to lasers, and there's always a new way to separate this stuff. And the cost for lasers 20 years ago used to be so expensive, nobody could do a separation with lasers. But now solid-state laser prices are very, very cheap, and they use very little power, and suddenly laser separations are really easy. And so I especially with something like lithium, which has decent, global abundance, which is, for example, found in great abundance in geothermal fluids, but it's not recovered from geothermal fluids because it costs too much today. There will eventually come a point where that matters. And if the price gets really high, well, then somebody will figure out how to make a sodium beta battery, which is much cheaper, and will displace that market. It's another version of we didn't run out of stones. There are many, many ways to deliver the same service in the economy.
So the bottom line is at what cost, at what efficiency, right? And what's the environmental impact?
Right. And ultimately, these things all flow from some combination of scarcity and standards and, supply chains. And people figure out how to make all those things better pretty quickly.
Of course, we may run out of water, right, Prakash? So there's there's one that we may actually run out of in some places.
In fact, I should point out that when I was looking at water, not as a subject on itself, but I was looking at the energy security. what is it that can ruin the progress we are making toward the energy. And two areas pop up very quickly. One was water and the other was cybersecurity. Because if we have this grid and you hear about cybersecurity all the time in the news, but when you look into deeper, you will find that anything we want to do with networks, it is a potential for cybersecurity, cyber threat. For example, the batteries, sooner or later the batteries are going to be intelligent. They will have so-called Internet of chip things into it. Vehicles are already connected to the Internet of Things. The sensors